What if I told you that the first South Africans lived here long before the pyramids were built? Long before written history even began? Their DNA still flows in millions of people today, yet their story is buried beneath layers of colonization, migration, and modern identity. Who were they, and what does science say about their place in South Africa's complex story of race and nationhood? To answer that question, we have to go back, not a few hundred or a few thousand years, but more than 200,000 years into the deep origins of humankind itself. Southern Africa was not just a homeland for early people, it was one of the birthplaces of modern humanity. The evidence lies not in myths or legends, but in the stones, bones, and caves scattered across the southern tip of the continent. At sites like Blombos Cave, near Still Bay, Klazi's River, and Border Cave, archaeologists have uncovered signs of early human life that predate most civilizations by tens of thousands of years. Inside Blombos Cave, researchers found engraved ochre pieces and shell beads that are over 70,000 years old. These artifacts show that the people who lived there were not primitive. They were capable of abstract thought, symbolic art, and complex social structures. They were, in every sense, fully human, long before Europe or Asia had developed written cultures. So who were these ancient people? Their descendants are known today as the Koisan, a broad group that includes both the San, sometimes called Bushmen, and the Khoisan, who were pastoralists. For tens of thousands of years, these people lived as hunter-gatherers across what we now call South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana. They read the land like a book, tracking animals, identifying plants for medicine, and living in harmony with their environment. Their languages, rich in clicking sounds, are among the oldest spoken languages on Earth, connecting us directly to the dawn of human speech. Their art tells stories of spirituality and survival. In rock shelters across the Drakensberg Mountains and the Cedarberg, paintings show elands, shamans, and trance dances, moments where humans reached out to the spirit world through ritual. These were not decorations, they were records of a worldview that saw nature, people, and spirit as one connected whole. But archaeology is only one piece of the story. Modern genetics provides even more powerful evidence. When scientists mapped the DNA of people across the world, they found that the Koisan carry the oldest human genetic lineages ever discovered. Their DNA diverged from all other modern humans tens of thousands of years before any other known population split off. This means that every human being alive today could trace their ancestral line back to people who looked and lived much like the ancient San of Southern Africa. In a sense, Southern Africa is not only home to the first South Africans, it is the birthplace of all humanity. The story of the Koisan is not just their story, it is ours too. Every continent, every race, every person alive carries within their genes a faint echo of those early ancestors who once walked barefoot through the fynbos and sands of this region. But history did not remain frozen in those caves. Around 2,000 years ago, waves of Bantu-speaking farmers began migrating from Central Africa into the south. They brought with them iron tools, livestock, and new forms of agriculture. They settled the fertile lands and introduced large-scale farming, forever changing the human landscape of southern Africa. The arrival of these groups did not erase the Koisan, but it began a long process of displacement and mixing. Some Koisan communities were absorbed into Bantu-speaking groups through intermarriage, while others were pushed into more remote areas like the Kalahari Desert, where some of their descendants still live today. Then, centuries later, came the greatest disruption of all: European colonization. When Dutch settlers arrived at the Cape in 1652, they encountered the Khoisan herders and San hunters who had lived there for thousands of years. What followed was a tragedy repeated across the globe: land dispossession, violence, slavery, and near erasure. The Koisan were among the first victims of colonial genocide in South Africa. Entire communities were wiped out or forced into servitude. Their land was taken, their languages suppressed, and their cultural identity fragmented beyond recognition. As colonial society evolved, many descendants of the Koisan were classified under new racial categories: colored, Nama, or Griqua. These were not chosen identities, They were imposed labels meant to erase the deep indigenous heritage that predated both colonial and Bantu presence in the region. Under apartheid, this erasure deepened. The narrative of who the original South Africans were became distorted by political ideology and racial classification. Yet the science and the soil tell a different story. Archaeology, anthropology, and genetics all converge on a simple, undeniable truth. The Koisan were here first. They are the original custodians of this land, and their history stretches back to the earliest moments of human existence. But recognition of this fact has been slow, and even today, many Koisan descendants struggle for official acknowledgement, land rights, and cultural restoration. In 2019, after decades of activism, the South African government officially recognized Khoisan communities as indigenous peoples under the Traditional and Khoisan Leadership Act. It was a symbolic victory, but for many it came too late and with too little practical change. Land claims remain difficult to prove because written records of early occupation do not exist. Their sacred sites, caves, mountains, and rivers that carry ancestral meaning are often treated as tourist attractions or archaeological curiosities rather than living heritage. But beneath all these struggles lies a deeper question. What does it mean to be the first? In a nation as diverse as South Africa, identity is never simple. The country is home to people whose ancestors arrived thousands of years apart. San hunters, Bantu farmers, European settlers, Indian laborers, and more. Yet understanding who came first is not about exclusion or superiority, it is about truth. The truth that South Africa's story began long before colonial borders or modern politics, with people who hunted, painted, sang, and dreamed on this land. Acknowledging the Koisan as the first people does not divide South Africans. It unites them in the knowledge that their collective history starts from a single source. The story of the Koisan is not one of extinction, but of endurance. Despite centuries of erasure, elements of their culture live on, in language, in place names, in oral traditions, and even in the genetic makeup of millions of South Africans today. Imagine walking through the streets of Cape Town, the fields of the Karoo, or the dunes of the Kalahari, and realizing that the ancestors of the very first humans once stood where you stand now. Every stone, every river, every mountain carries echoes of their presence. When archaeologists pick up a piece of engraved ochre or a shell bead, they are not just finding artifacts, they are touching the earliest expressions of human creativity. So who were the first people of South Africa? The answer lies in the intersection of science and spirit. Archaeology tells us they were here over 100,000 years ago. Genetics tells us their bloodlines are the oldest on Earth. Oral history tells us they understood the land better than anyone who came after them. And modern identity reminds us that their descendants are still here, fighting to be seen and heard in a country built on their ancestors' soil. As South Africa continues to grapple with questions of land, belonging, and nationhood, perhaps the lesson from the Koisan is this: we cannot build a future without acknowledging our deepest past. The story of the first people is not a story of them, it is a story of us. Every South African, regardless of color or creed, carries a part of that ancient lineage, whether in DNA, in language, or in spirit. The oldest known human traces are found in this land. And if the bones of our ancestors could speak, they would tell us that home is not defined by who arrived first, but by how we choose to remember and honor those who did. The Koisan remind us that being first is not about ownership, it's about origin. It's about where humanity began and how far we've drifted from that shared beginning. So next time you hear the wind across the Cape or see a rock painting on a forgotten wall, remember, you are standing in one of the oldest chapters of human history. The story of South Africa does not begin in 1652. It begins in the footprints of the first people who walked this land not as tribes or races, but as the first humans to call this place home.